All right, and here next for the takeover lessons from the scaling Angry Birds to global phenomenon. And we're gonna have one person online and one here. Ladies and gentlemen, we'd like to introduce you Dalia Lašaite, co-founder and CEO of CGTrader, the world's leading provider of 3D content. Hello, good day. How are you doing today?
Very good, thank you.
Pleasure. Let's give a big round of applause, ladies and gentlemen. All right. Let's big up those people that are going here on the stage today. And we're going to have one person here online. We're going to have online Mikael Hed, the chairman of CGTrader. All right? Mikael is the one of Finland's most successful interpreters as the CEO of Rovio. We're going to hold him online in a couple of seconds. All right, ladies and gentlemen, can I hear a little bit? How do you feel today? Are you ready to listen for some more good information? Yeah. Woo! All right, all right. It's a pleasure that you're here today. It's really amazing and strange to watch the people's eyes and faces. We were working the cameras for a couple of years right now, so it's a big pleasure to have you here outside, and we're gonna have an amazing day and day tomorrow, so don't forget to come here also from the 10 in the morning. All right, so ladies and gentlemen, do we have Mikael here online already? Hello? I think we can see him already, but can we hear him? Hello, sir. Good day.
Not be on mute.
All right. How are you?
Good, thank you. How are you?
Oh, we're great here. We have a good, great weather and a fantastic mood here in the audience. Can we give a big round of applause one more time? I hope you can hear us and have a great talk.
Thank you. So, Mikael, welcome to Startup Fair.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So I'll maybe do a quick introduction of Mikael. I'm sure many of you know, but Mikael is one of the most prominent entrepreneurs in Europe. Under his leadership, Rovio launched a game called Angry Birds that turned into one of the most successful entertainment and film and merchandising brands all over the world. And he was also in charge for production of Angry Birds movie. So we are very excited to have this fireside chat today. More recently, Mikael has been a growth partner at Evely Growth Partners. And this year, together with the fund, he invested in CGTrader and joined CGTrader as the chairman. So they're actually absolutely fascinating story of how Angry Birds grew and how they conquered the world. So I would like to go right into it. Mikael, can you tell us a bit about the origins of Angry Birds? How did it start?
Sure. So the story of Rovio goes back all the way to 2003. That was when my cousin Niklas and two of his friends, who were students at Helsinki University of Technology, started the company, and there were three programmers, and they had this thought that they would like to make games. In early 2004, I joined the company and started looking at the commercial side of the business. And then for the next several years, the company was kind of trying to find its way in mobile games, because that whole industry was like really non-existent at the time, or it was like a very different business than it was later on. Angry Birds itself only got started in 2009. So that was really one of our later games. We had tried many different kinds of things by then, and so in 2009 we actually had a kind of get together with my cousin. We had to really look at where we were in the company and take a step back and just see what we were doing right and what we were doing wrong, and really try and pivot what we were doing. And so we shifted the company strategy from one where we had made games for multiple platforms into one where we just jumped on and just fully embraced the iPhone ecosystem. So the big change, of course, that had happened was that Apple introduced the App Store, which for the first time really gave a global marketplace to mobile gaming companies, and as opposed to the previous models, which were all it was a very fragmented market owned by operators and such. And so when we then decided to make a game only for iPhone, that was a big change already. But not only that, we decided to take a slightly different approach also in what type of games we were making. So now we wanted to make a game that actually would have a different approach from what the others were doing. So typically the conventional wisdom in mobile games back then was that you would make a game, you'd launch it, and then forget about it, really, because the earnings logic was that you have a game and it sells for a while, and then you have to come up with your next game. But to me, that didn't really seem to make a lot of sense, because you put so much effort in a game, and your chances of ever making it to the top 10, which is where all the money is made, is so slim. So our idea was that, okay, well, if you ever make it to the top 10, if you're so lucky, well, how could you extend that stay there? And so we decided to go for an approach where instead of just making one game and then making the sequel to it, that we would really just keep servicing that one game and making a lot more content for that game for the players for free, and that really seemed to work, and it resonated very well with the audience.
So I think we all remember the time when Angry Birds was a mobile game, and then all of a sudden it became, on your shampoo bottle, on merchandising in China, all over the world, you could see the Angry Birds and the pigs. And so this is very interesting and a very unconventional approach, right? Because typically, very often the advice is to focus and to just focus on making games. So in terms of scaling, were there any challenges? Did you have any challenges moving forward with this unusual approach and thinking about multiple revenue streams from the very beginning?
Yeah, I think, of course, yeah, as you say, that is a very typical thing that most companies, and the conventional wisdom, yes, it is, that your company should always focus on just its core business. But I interpreted that in a way is that, well, that then leaves the door open it just means that you have to define your core business in such a way that you can do whatever you want. So, so for me, really the key part was that I didn't see Angry Birds as only a game. I approached it as a much longer play. I thought about the brand itself. How can we create a brand that would have something that would actually last much longer than just one game on one platform? And so we started to think about what are the ways to really support that brand and to actually to create fans that would come back for more products around that same brand, whether it's a game or anything else. And so for us, everything that we could do to support that brand became super important. And so the idea of merchandising was one that actually supported that, because I thought, well, of course there's an earnings opportunity there as well, but every time you have your product on the shelves, you do get exposure for your brand, and it's kind of free exposure. Not that it's better than free, because somebody's paying you for that product to be there on the shelf. So that was good, but then everything we did was looking at what's the next kind of big tentpole release around that one brand, and of course then the biggest thing I could think about for an entertainment brand was a movie. And so that's the direction that very early on we decided to shift towards. And so we started an animation studio. We actually bought a little startup to be the foundation of that, and we made short form animation and took the learnings, and then we went on to do a full feature length animated film. And going back to focusing on core businesses, and of course you could say that our core business was very far from making animated movies, and not only that, but doing that at great risk. I mean, that movie was $75 million investment for us. But it paid out in the end, and we made a good profit on the movie, and it supported the brand again and gave it a lot more lifetime and potential for earnings elsewhere. So I think that really I tend to treat with skepticism this idea and the notion that companies should only focus on one single thing. Because I do think that it's important that companies have several revenue streams to rely on.
All right. And when Angry Birds was launched and when it saw the initial success, the scaling of the company was unbelievable. You just had 12 people, right, when you launched, and then a couple of years later, you had 1,000 people. And the revenue went from almost nothing to hundreds of millions, right? So how do you scale an organization at this pace?
Yeah, I mean, that is, of course, typically people who end up in that situation very often haven't done it before, have not scaled something at that pace. So it was a lot of learning, for sure. But I approach that much in the same way that I would approach, for instance, going into a business that I don't know anything about, like how can you make an animated movie if you've never done that before? Well, you hire the right people. And in this case, too, the first thing we really focused on was getting a solid recruitment operation in place. So we hired great HR people who had been working with rapid scaling before. And so that helped. And of course, at the same time, we hired experienced managers who helped us also set in place the processes in the organization to really manage all of that. Because of course, running an organization of hundreds of people is very different from running an organization with a dozen people, obviously.
And in terms of your role as a CEO, so how did that change? I'm sure, as you say, it's very different to manage a small company versus a 1,000 people global company. How did you approach that?
Yeah, I think there, all the time, my job was to try and keep up with that pace too, personally. I mean, trying to really learn constantly more, but still, it was about focusing on the big picture itself, on what it is that we're trying to do as a company, what are we trying to achieve here, and it was still always about that brand and trying to get everybody to focus on developing the brand and everything to do with that, and also trying to focus on building anything to support that business for us.
And if you look back at that time, is there anything you would do differently, maybe?
Well, I think my approach as a startup entrepreneur was one where I like to learn new things, and I like to try new things as well. And I felt that was always very valuable for us. And so many great business opportunities came our way because we actually dared to try things that we might not have if we had just focused on doing games. And so those were some of our greatest successes, but of course that means that there's a lot of misses too. So when you try a lot of things, you're going to fail at a lot of things, but you're also going to succeed at something. So as long as we kept doing more things right than we did wrong, I was happy. So I think that it's like now I do investing, and that's the same type of thing, is you take a portfolio approach in that you say you just have to do enough things right to succeed.
All right, so you touched upon investing, and you are now an active investor. You are making angel investments, and you're also investing with Heavily Growth Partners. So I'm sure there are many entrepreneurs in the audience. Maybe you could share what you're looking for in the companies to invest in, and what's your typical approach?
Right, well, we look at, of course, we look at the business fundamentals itself. We look at how is this company doing versus its competitors. We're looking at the growth figures, of course, past growth, and then look at what's our estimate of their true growth potential. Because typically every company has this kind of like a hockey stick forecast where the future is incredibly bright in their presentations, but then it's our job to really try to look past that and look at what's the true potential. How does the competitive landscape look like, and can this team do it? Do we believe that, and how well do they understand their business, the industry, the future, and do we believe that they can grow with this company if we make this investment? And so those are really, it comes down to those simple things. And of course, we look at, are there any particular red flags, for instance, that might concern us regarding the possibility for this company to actually execute their plans.
All right, so I just wanted to point out that it seems that we have an app where you can actually type your questions to Mikael, so please add the questions if you have any. But at the same time, I wanted to also touch upon another topic that is very important to many people in the audience, as many people in the audience are founders and leaders. And maybe you could share some leadership hacks or approaches that worked for you in scaling Rovio and managing such a huge company, as a leader.
Yeah, I think certainly one thing that I had a kind of like a personal revelation was that in many organizations and for many people, there seems to be this kind of like a need to always hide anything that they're not actually good at, because the expectation, especially when you're talking with other leaders, is that the leader expects that they cannot show any weakness. And to me, that's a weakness in itself, in a way, because what it means is that then it becomes very hard to support those leaders as well if you don't know them very well and you don't know what their strengths and weaknesses are. So what I usually did with the other leaders in my organization is I would have a discussion with them to ask them, really, I asked them, so if you could assume that with everything you have to do, everything that's part of your job and what you fill your days and your weeks with, and you could assume that everything gets taken care of very well, even if you didn't do them. Now, how would you fill your calendar? What are the things that you would do? What would you focus on? And usually that was a very good discussion to have, because it would actually reveal what those leaders' real strengths were. Because typically people will focus on what they're good at, and conversely, asking them what are the things they would like to do less of if they had the chance, and that would usually show that, okay, this is not what their particular strength is. And I would actually encourage this type of discussion, because I could always support these people by having them build a team around them that would then be a well-rounded team where we can be sure that they have all of the things that they need, rather than trying to pretend that they're perfect, because nobody is good at everything. And I think that acceptance is important for everyone. And the better you know yourself, the better it is for being able to run a successful company.
Yeah, that sounds like a very good approach. So I see no questions from the audience. Please add if you have any. But in the meantime, I'll ask another question. So we heard the story of Angry Birds and that it took a really long time to launch this and hit this massive success. If you look at this time that you were working on these many games, how do you stay resilient and keep on believing and trying new things? How do you do that?
Well, that's a good question. Of course, what I left out earlier was that I wasn't there. There was a longer time period when I wasn't there. And I actually left the company in 2005 because my father had invested in the company. He's a very strong-willed individual, and so of course we couldn't fit in the same company for too long. And so I left for a while, and the company kept doing what it was doing. And one of the reasons why I left was that I disagreed with the strategy of the company. Now, why that company had the resilience to do what it did is that, of course, when you're a startup entrepreneur and you've invested a lot in it, you're also kind of stuck with it. So in many cases, there isn't much choice but just to keep on going. And that's also where we found ourselves. Now, of course, I would say that it takes a lot of resilience and a lot of tries to be successful at something. And even if you do, you're not always successful. But if you don't try, you for sure won't be successful. So, but I think what actually was very good then when I joined later in 2009, again, was that because I hadn't been in the company for a while, it gave us the opportunity to take a completely fresh look at everything the company was doing and actually starting to question everything that was being done in the company and to turn it kind of upside down. And that I think is something that is very hard to do if you're there all the time. You've made all those decisions yourself over the years. Doing the pivot can be hard, but I think that those pivot moments can be crucial.
And I would add that probably questioning was quite risky, right? So you had your approaches with the way you were doing things, but the bet on iPhone platform was quite risky at that point. The BlackBerry was still the main player, right? So let's, for startups here in the audience, if we summarize the lessons learned from Angry Birds' journey, how would you say, what were the main factors that led to the success?
Well, number one, I'd say we were at the right place at the right time. So that turned out to be exactly the time to be, of course, on the iPhone platform. And I do think that we helped shape the whole ecosystem in our approach on how to keep servicing that game. And I think that so there were certain good observations from our part in just seeing the trends and then being able to actually execute as well a strategy that really went along with those trends.
All right, sounds great. So I think maybe on this note we can sum up and wish for the startups here in Lithuania to be resilient, to be at the right place and the right time, to question everything and to make bets and scale the companies like Angry Birds did. Thank you very much, Mikael, for joining us at Startup Fair.
All right, thank you, Dalia.
Thank you guys very much. It's a big pleasure was listening to you both. Ačiū Jums labai.